The USGA Green Section has been supporting golf course sustainability since 1920. Its work is built on 5 key pillars: research, education, course consulting, technology tools, and championship agronomy. Through these, they help superintendents improve playing conditions, reduce environmental impact, and cut maintenance costs, which makes the game better for everyone, from the pros to everyday players. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Rolling with the Green Section. My name is Adam Kershane, joined by Brian Laurent from Turf Today on the Superintendent Network. This being our 4th installment of Rolling with the Green Section, we join Tom Gould and Brian Gietka for a full tour of turf trouble. Tom talks about wet wilt and why smart seeding matters, and Brian breaks down why hope is not a plan, especially when winter injury shows up. Quick, practical, and straight from the experts. Let's get into this thing.
What's cooking, man?
Not much. Just in the office today, trying to catch up on stuff, getting some presentations ready to go for this winter. So finally kind of starting to slow down, switch some gears a little bit. So it's been a really fun year, been a really hard year for a lot of guys, but been a good first year to be on staff.
An interesting first year to be on staff, and
absolutely.
We'll dive into that here a little bit. But what's your with the conference schedule, just about upon us here? What's your speaking engagement calendar look like here this winter?
Yeah, nothing too crazy. A few talks throughout the region. I know going down to Oklahoma for the Oklahoma Turf Conference, up to Wisconsin for the Wisconsin Turf Symposium. The Midwest guys here in Chicago around home, and then a few more next year, Iowa, and then the national conference. So plenty. Luckily,
I was going to say that doesn't sound like just a few. I mean, that's you're on the road.
It's fun though. It's good to kind of catch up with all these guys that I get to do visits with, and people that I've kind of gotten to network throughout my career. So it's all in good fun.
So give us a little insight, Tom. Tell us who you are and kind of how you found your way to the USGA.
Yeah. So grew up in Iowa. I'm an Iowa guy. Grew up in Des Moines, middle of the state. My parents have videos of me on my 2nd birthday. I got one of those little Tykes push lawnmowers, and they swear I put 100,000 miles on the thing. So I've always been interested in grass. Had a little lawn care business in high school. Found my way to Iowa State and their turf program there, and fell in love with it, really. So did some internships kind of in both golf and sports turf. Did a little bit of work in like minor league baseball and collegiate athletics, and found my way into kind of a cool deal in graduate school where I was brought in to do research, but then also on top of that, Jack Trice Stadium, Iowa State's football field was due for a renovation. So we built out basically sand cap 6 acres of cornfield, and I designed the irrigation and grew in 6 acres of Kentucky bluegrass sod for the stadium. So it was nice to work out at the farm, do my research, and then go across the property and mow my sod fields and get those all squared away for the next season for football. So really a cool experience. And then went from there, interned with the USGA, interned with now kind of my boss, Zach Nicoludis, which is kind of funny now, but interned with him, did some championships, did some course consulting, and really, really loved what they do over at the Green Section. So I wanted to be a part of it, and found my way here. So joined the staff just over a year ago. And before that, I was at Chicago Golf Club for a year and a half, and just been absolutely loving this new role and being able to help superintendents out and how they can be more efficient and better grow.
I was just going to ask, Tom, for people that are wondering about becoming an agronomist one day, what does the first year look like when you're working for an organization like the USGA?
The first year is, there's no good way to get good at this stuff other than just doing visits. Obviously, they have a really good onboarding program here. So initially it was starting off traveling with a bunch of agronomists, seeing how they do their thing as they travel around. But, demand has been so high for visits. It's really kind of jumped in with both feet and been able to take on a decent consulting load all throughout the country. So just been learning by by doing it, which has been really awesome. And it's been really cool experience just to see what everybody does as they manage their golf courses from all throughout the country. I have the privilege of having, a territory that, I go from, up into Canada all the way down to the southern border of Texas, border of Mexico. So I get to see a lot of different stuff, a lot of different growing environments and situations. So been really cool.
I'm glad you mentioned the sports background too. We have that conversation with several people that have that same path. As you look back on your time in the sports turf world and now your time with primarily superintendents, what are some of the things you think that those two sections of the turf industry could really learn from one another?
They're so similar, but they're just a little different, especially in the high end of the sports turf world. Most of those people are working with USGA spec root zones in their sports fields, right? So managing those, top dressing those is honestly can be pretty similar how they culturally manage these surfaces. The sports turf world has a little bit of a challenge in terms of they have, especially for football, big, strong athletes moving around, and they can make a mess. But certainly, lots to be similar. Obviously, I think golf, being able to, there's nothing cooler agronomically, I don't think, than really getting a putting green, turf at, a tenth of an inch or less, really dialed in. I just think it's really quite the feat. So certainly something that's attracted me to golf is just, how difficult and how much variety there is in terms of a golf course in general, and the variety throughout the year. But it's so funny that, people think that they're two completely different worlds, but they really are pretty similar.
What do you think superintendents, you mentioned football, the large athletes that are running around on there, and obviously a lot of that happens between the hashes. So compaction, obviously, on football fields is a pretty significant issue. What do you think? Is there something superintendents could learn from the way some of those football field managers manage compaction on their fields?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about big athletes on football fields, but then in addition, you turn around and golf courses have carts and vehicles driving all over the place on fairways and in traffic points and points of congestion. And certainly there's plenty to be taken from either side. Compaction is universal in that way. But yeah, I mean, certainly I think they live in the same world of, ways to decompact through aerification, moving traffic around. All of those things are all very similar. So they beat to the same drum. It's just a little different site.
So, Tom, one of the things we wanted to talk about today with you was just some of the challenges you guys have faced in your region. A lot of the superintendents out there and some of the battles on the golf course. You wrote two really good articles for the USGA Green section. It's Wet Wilt season and Mending by seeding. So, if you wouldn't mind, just break those down for us and talk about some of those really big challenges that you guys have faced.
Yeah, like I said, it was an interesting year to be on my first year on staff here in Chicago specifically. Most courses had two, and some had even three occurrences in the month of July where they got 3+ inches of rain, followed immediately by mid to high 90s air temperatures immediately following. So some sites, where you don't get a lot of air movement, not a lot of subsurface drainage, and things stayed wet, they got pretty ugly in terms of what they refer to as wet wilting, or essentially the plant's not able to transpire or evaporate this water from the leaf blades, and basically the turf sits, has completely adequate moisture, but it's not able to cool itself. What they refers to as cooks, and when I describe it to Greens committee members, I mentioned that it's essentially what cooked spinach might resemble. It's not great. So it's a really tough year in that regard. Now you go up to areas like into Canada, and they had an incredibly dry year. So it's just all the luck of the draw, I guess, in terms of what Mother Nature gives you. But spent a lot of time talking about like how to prevent things like wet wilt, or, this, providing drainage improvements, just being able to beef up your infrastructure to accommodate for a variety of different, situations that Mother Nature can provide. So, and the tough part about wet wilt is once you have it, especially in the heat of the summer, remediating it really requires nicer air temperatures or cooler air temperatures. So oftentimes, courses that I visit in the early part of July, especially in the Midwest where it gets pretty humid, the result, the true fix for those problems is oftentimes, wait for fall and wait for optimal turfgrass growing conditions to return. Luckily, this fall for the Midwest and largely most of the country has been on the warmer side, which has been really nice. A lot of people that got pretty dinged up throughout the summertime really were able to recover really nicely this fall. But talking also about mending, by seeding, because I go to so many courses where they've lost turf on putting greens, and just making sure to get back to the basics in terms of establishment, in terms of how to bring these areas back. If you're doing it by seed, what's the best time? What's your best seeding rate? How do you ensure, optimal seed to soil contact? Things of that sort. It was a topic that came up a lot. It's like, okay, we have all these areas that, have wilted, and, we've lost turf. Now what? So being as straightforward as you can in terms of the science of establishment is certainly beneficial, and doing it on a timeline and giving it enough care and fertility to really give promise to regrowth has been big, and a lot of courses have done quite well this fall.
I kind of got a little chuckle out of the almost the cause and effect cadence that you had with those two articles, talking about wet wilt and then talking about seeding. So, kind of following up with it, but going back to the wet wilt article that you wrote, talk a little bit about, again, some of the causes, environmental causes, infrastructure causes, and then some of the things people can be doing now to avoid those problems in the future.
There were some commonalities in terms of courses that seemed to get wet wilt worse than others. Oftentimes courses that had push-up construction putting greens with limited to no subsurface drainage underneath. And then also areas that had, heavy population to poa annua, limited air movement. All of these things kind of made a perfect recipe for, suboptimal growing environments. And, push-up putting greens without subsurface drainage, when you have limited, a moderate amount of precipitation in a year, work just fine. I was saying that all throughout the year. It's like, 85% of the time, this putting green construction works excellently. But, for this 15% of the time, I've had superintendents that were saying that this was the hardest summer that they've ever had, or some people were referring it back to the summer of 1985. So, 40 years ago. Oftentimes it's just suboptimal growing environments. So a lot of talks were, we're here. We've already had this, happen. This wet wilt has happened. It will get better this fall, but how do we build out our infrastructure to accommodate for these kind of crazy weather years, right? For suboptimal, high precipitation, high temperature kind of situations. I think of it, the push-up putting green construction, if you have 3 to 5 inches of sand, as soon as, you get an inch and a half of rain, that sand layer is completely saturated. And what's driving drainage is that native soil below, which can be, 0.05 to 0.2 inches an hour, so it's not, it can be slow. So if you're able to find a way to add some subsurface drainage infrastructure, sand channel drainage, rope drainage, and, anything really to encourage additional drainage, to essentially allow the driver of drainage in your putting green profile to be, sand drainage or, drainage infrastructure rather than the native soil below, is going to be a big deal. Obviously, if the plant's not able to transpire, air movement really is a big part of that. The plant sitting, stagnant, with lots of high humidity environments, it's just not able to transpire and drive water through the plant to cool itself. So air movement's a big piece of that puzzle as well. Thinning trees oftentimes, and even, low lying areas, you have no control over the amount of limited air movement that you get. Sometimes things like installing, fan infrastructure or encouraging, air movement mechanically is the best way to accommodate.
That was an awesome breakdown. Really well said.
It came up quite a bit. It came up quite
No,
a bit
I can
this year.
imagine.
So,
So flip over to the other side now. Talk about, break down that mending process and, what guys are seeing with success going for the seeding.
Lots of questions from superintendents about how do I best get seed to soil contact? How do I best seed, especially creeping bentgrass? It's such a small size seed, when from afar, it looks almost like sawdust, right? So oftentimes, there's a variety of ways to encourage seed to soil contact. When you're aerifying in the fall, you can put it down right before you top dress, things of that sort. You can get it, optimal seed to soil contact. The only thing that you got to be thinking about is because that bentgrass seed is so small, the energy that it has to essentially send a radical up and absorb sunlight isn't that much. So you can't bury it 3 to 4 inches down in the soil. It just doesn't have enough carbohydrate storage to shoot through all that much soil to really grow and develop. So, really that 1/4 inch depth is something that I was pushing to superintendents as I was traveling around. It's like, these seeds are so small and they dry out so easily. It's very challenging to get it to grow, especially when you're trying to push conditioning to a point where you're still trying to have, optimal playability day in and day out, trying to drive firmness and things of that sort. So a lot of the conversations around, getting, and mending these areas is, kind of take a step back and, play the long game in terms of, you can try and push these areas to be as optimally playable as possible. But if you're really beat up, you're going to need to, the long-term solution is to kind of take a step back, try and, grow in these areas and get them in a great position going into this winter to grow in for the spring, playing the long game in terms of, if you're, went to a few courses where they had, issues with wet wilt and they'd seed and then, outing comes in and they want to try and push conditioning. And sometimes that can have very negative impacts on your establishment of your new seed. You think about overseeding in more of the southern part of the country, they scalp down their Bermuda grass, they throw ryegrass, and from that point forward, they're growing ryegrass in terms of how they water and how they program. It's tough to do that in a bentgrass putting green environment, but it's certainly something that you have to be considering to just kind of give it a chance anyways.
So obviously up in the north, kind of where we both are, well, all of us are, the seed window is probably pretty much shut now. So what can someone that just went through the seeding process, repairing some of those areas, how can they protect those new seedlings going into the winter? And then another part of that question is for those that maybe didn't get a very good catch with their seeding this fall, what should they be thinking about in order to hit the ground running in the spring?
Yeah, great questions. Yeah, seeding window for sure. Around Chicago where I'm at, the second week of August to the end of September is really your optimal window. So yeah, we're well beyond being in a position where you can get optimal germination with soil temperatures and then have them essentially mature enough to withstand cold, dry winter temperatures. But protecting those, obviously the biggest piece is getting them mature enough by having the optimal seed timing, doing things to cover up the crowns of these plants for the wintertime. Things like heavy top dressing, covering. Those are all certainly options to kind of help out. But if you're haven't had a good catch at this point, the tough part is that as soon as weather warms up in the spring, people want to golf. But the soil temperatures oftentimes aren't necessarily there to support good germination of cool season turfs. So it makes it really challenging to beat essentially the spring golf to the punch of trying to establish in the spring. So oftentimes in the spring, if you're trying to get areas to mend, especially early on, looking at places like putting green nurseries and things of that sort to just plug out or sod these areas is probably your best move.
So talk about, obviously it was for many an unprecedented type summer. But I think weather patterns tend to repeat themselves. How can people learn from the year that we just had and be better prepared for the future?
Yeah. I mean, traveling around, obviously when people have turf loss on putting greens, it's not a fun time. You want to say, oh, well, the last time we had a year like this, most are saying is 1985. You can't say that it's not going to be the same next year. You just don't know. So oftentimes looking at what we experienced this year, it's all about improving growing environments, subsurface drainage infrastructure improvements, especially on push-up putting greens that don't have subsurface drainage, is very important. Improving air movement through, oftentimes it's by tree removal or thinning of shrubberies or anything of that sort. And then also encouraging morning sunlight. Very underrated, but morning sunlight, in terms of burning off dew and lessening your prolonged leaf wetness that can, provide immense disease pressure is a huge part of it, especially if you're in a situation where you're saturated and you're trying to evaporate or transpire as much water through the plant to cool it down. You don't want to be wet on the leaf blade. That just further dampens your ability to transpire. So really it's been when you visit courses, they want to, especially memberships, want a fast answer, like, oh, well, you just need to do this one thing, and then you're going to have these areas back. Unfortunately, the nature of this beast is that it's really a long-term kind of infrastructure setup that really gets you from not having these issues again. I've been really tickled at least the fact that, really tough summer, well, you talk about cool spring into hot, wet summer was just an absolutely brutal sequence for a lot of superintendents. But I've been really tickled at the idea that, this fall has been warmer and, it's, the second week, going into the second week of November, and we've got 60-degree temperatures here in Chicago, which is pretty atypical. So it's been a tough year, but I think people are in a lot better spot going into winter, and it's going to be a better year next year, most likely.
Nice. Mother Nature's undefeated, though, right? So it's
don't let
just
her hear
plan
that.
accordingly. That's all. That's what it's all about, man. I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, glad you got that first year under your belt and were able to withstand the crazy summer here. We appreciate you coming on and talking to us a little bit about what you've seen throughout the summer, and we look forward to doing it again sometime soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was an absolute pleasure getting to chat with you guys.
Being down in Chicago, White Sox or Cubs?
Now, you see, growing up in Iowa, you kind of get to make your pick.
Right.
So I'm a unpopular Cardinals fan in the Chicago market now.
Interesting.
Ooh.
With the Rams moving out of town, you also, I'm a Bears fan, and then, getting into hockey now that I'm in this town, Blackhawks. So I'm kind of an unconventional Chicago sports fan. But certainly, whenever the Cardinals come into town, come down to Wrigley, it's a cool area. I like to go, but like I said, like I worked in the minor leagues for the Cubs, so I have nothing but respect for the Cubs organization. It's not a place of hatred, but definitely support and cheer on my Cardinals.
Did you work for Palmer or Bordner over at Chicago Golf Club, or neither?
Craig Smith is the superintendent there now.
Craig, yeah.
He preceded Bordner, or succeeded Bordner.
Yeah,
so he's been there for 5 years, or 5 or 6 years. But at one point, Chicago Golf Club was, the entire management staff was under the age of 30. It was a young group
spot,
which is super, super fun and super cool to work and learn there.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that at a place like that, it was all, one of the greatest golf clubs in the world was trusted to a bunch of young whippersnappers. But.
Yeah, bunch of young guys
knew what you were doing.
Yeah, Craig is a sharp guy. So everybody seemed to have great trust in him, and rightfully so. So age is just a number.
That's right. I love it. Absolutely. Appreciate your time, Tom. And this will probably come out, what do you think, Adam? A week and a half, 2 weeks?
Yep, something like that.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Take care, Tom.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Too. Thanks.
Would you like to sign up for the USGA Green Section Record? Well, guess what? It's free, and it comes out twice a month. Head to Turf Today, link in bio. We have our link tree there with a whole bunch of different links for different things that we do. The USGA Green Section Record sign-up sheet is there. So click on that link, get yourself in there. Like I said, it's free. Why not? Get 2 free articles every week to help you learn about the golf course. It's a no-brainer. So head on over to Turf Today on Instagram, find our link tree, and sign up for the USGA Green Section Record today.
Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, likewise. Appreciate you taking the time to jump on here and have a little conversation.
Sure. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Where are you joining us today from?
I'm home, which is Hagerstown, Maryland. It's the skinniest part, Western Maryland.
Beautiful. I don't know if we've talked to somebody in Maryland before.
Yeah.
Making our way around.
Yeah. We've had Kyle was on.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Baltimore.
That's right.
So
there you go.
a little further away, but it's all right.
Yeah.
Mid-Atlantic. You're in the tough area right there, huh?
Well, makes for easy conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we dive into that, Brian, just give us a little bit of your background and how you found your way to the green section.
Sure. Yeah. Isn't it interesting how people find their way into where they are, especially in this industry? It's pretty cool. So I grew up in Baltimore, and I was a water-oriented family. So I grew up working on my uncle's crab boat, literally pulling crab pots for summers, and worked for another uncle, turning a wrench on his boat repair business, and got to a point. I said, you know what, I want to do something completely different. At the point I was starting college, an engineering major, and saw this job at a place called Chestnut Ridge Country Club, and on the other side of Baltimore. And I thought, you know what, that looks pretty cool. I'm going to try this out. And I loved it from day one. I literally, after a few months, I changed my major and dove into it. And at that point, I was blessed to work for a brand new superintendent by the name of Ralph Miola. And he had worked for Paul B. Latchall at Marion as an assistant, Jim Loke at Bent Creek as an assistant, worked down at Augusta as an intern, and I'm sure some other things. But even looking back now, all these years later, what I learned in those first 2 years was pretty amazing, what he taught me and the time he gave me. And one of the things I reflect on regularly is he always drove home that it was okay if we didn't finish everything that we wanted to today, as long as what we accomplished was done well. And I even think about that, like in my role now, like when I'm tired in the evenings, but I got to write emails, I'll write a lot of drafts and let them sit. And then in the morning when I'm fresh, just pump them out and make sure it's right, not confuse someone. So that was really great intro into what I was doing. Went to University of Maryland, and then worked a couple other courses, and then found my way to a club called Woodholm Country Club, which was in Pikesville on the other side of Baltimore as well. And that was a different superintendent. He was Steve Potter, and he had he ended up being a superintendent there for 40 years. He retired a while ago now, but they hosted in 1995 Mid Amateur as a co-host with Kays Valley. Were in their heyday at the time and really spending money, a tremendous amount of construction and renovation, irrigation upgrades. And you think this is 20 years ago, so it's kind of funny, things like digital cameras and taking records from pad and paper and putting them into Excel, like all that was new, and that was really cool to just upgrade just the operation there and get into equipment leasing. That was kind of a new concept as well. So we did a tremendous amount in my 5 years I was there. And again, I just loved it. I really did, and immersed myself into it, lived there. And Steve's buddies were Dr. Peter Noden, who was one of my professors in school, and spent a lot of time with him. And he was truly a mentor. He was actually even at my wedding when I got married. And the other was Stanley Zontek, longtime USGA agronomist. And, I was fortunate to spend a lot of time with those guys. And they truly showed me how special the industry is. And it's especially Stanley. I mean, he truly understood what it meant to wear the 4 letters that we are blessed to wear, and that what we do is much bigger than ourselves. And I've always believed that, and I always thought it was the coolest job in the world. And spoiler alert, it is. But it, never really went gung ho at that point, thinking, I want to be a USGA agronomist. I wanted a family, and I wanted to be a superintendent, and I wanted to survive, right? We just had a rough summer, and so I set out, and I've been out in Hagerstown, Maryland, and I was superintendent of a club called Fountainhead Country Club, which was a great small property, a 1924 Donald Ross designed golf course, and spent, I guess, 15 years total. And I still live 2 miles away. It was great, a small property. We did pre-pandemic 9,000 rounds of golf, so we could really do a lot whenever we wanted with a little, and it was fun. Like, they were just good people, and just really loved what I was doing, and got to be present for my kids. Anything they had going on, I was there, and it was really good time. And then in 2018 is when things kind of changed for me. So I had been superintendent for 10 years. And we hosted the Maryland State Open, and for a little private club that was 6,300 yards from the tips, after 54 holes, we had 4 players tied at even par. So we were able to get some teeth into the little Donald Ross golf course out in Western Maryland here, and that was fun, and kind of rode that high, because that September, I was selected by GCSAA as one of 10 to volunteer at the 2018 Ryder Cup at Golf National in Paris, France. So went there, had an absolute blast, and that's where things really changed for me, and say, you know what? I've been doing what I wanted to do for 10 years. I'm 30 some years old, and I'm not sure that I'm kind of done. I think maybe there is something next for me. And there's just so many amazing people out there when we were volunteering for that, and to the point that I actually went back in 2019 and volunteered at Golf National for the French Open. Oh, wow. And met a bunch of other amazing people, had a blast, and that's where I started really thinking, like, all right, what's next? What do I want to do next? And then we had that whole global pandemic thing that put a monkey wrench into what was next. And I actually found myself immersed more into the administrative side of the club, as with we didn't have a general manager. So I was myself and a club manager and a golf professional were leading the club through the unknowns of that, and learning about commercial mortgages, which is something I learned I didn't want to get any further into. So it was really good to see that, though, and really be able to reflect and say, you know what, I love the agronomics. I love being on a golf course, being outside, and I love travel too. So then the 2022 was the next French Open, and I actually went to Golf National a 3rd time. Oh, wow. And on my way over,
couldn't keep you away.
My job that I have now was posted, and I said, wife, kids don't really want to move, and they need an agronomist in the Mid-Atlantic. And I had always, everywhere I worked, had always taken course consulting service visits. So I had known Keith Happ, and I know Darren Bavard for 20 plus years, and Elliot Dowling was my agronomist for a bunch of years. And I thought, let's see where this goes. Like this could be good. And here we are, and I love it. It's worked out really well. I can't say enough good things about the USGA, what they've done for me and where I'm at in my career. I'm not a spotlight guy. I don't need everyone to know who I am, other than now I've been doing this for 26, 27 seasons. So I guess I kind of want my name out there just because I want people to reach out, because I've seen some stuff, And so this is my third full season with the USGA, and it's been fantastic. So my first year started off with, hey, travel with some other agronomists, get around a little bit, and that lasted for about 2 months. And then they said, okay, all right, here's what you're going to do, and here's consulting, and here's your here's your territory. Here, get after it, and it was good. I had a great time. I went all over the place and got out there. Ended up in my first year at 3 championships, and at one point, get a call from Darren Bavard and Jordan Booth, and they say, how's your July looking? And I'm like, well, I've got a couple visits. And they say, well, yeah, actually, you're going to go to Colorado Springs by yourself as lead agronomist for the girls juniors. Oh, okay.
Sweet.
All right. I've never been to Colorado Springs. I've never met the championship director, but went out there, had a blast, worked out really well. People were fantastic. The championship went fantastic. So since then, I guess I've had a role in 7 championships, five as lead agronomist, and I really love that aspect of what we do. It really gets it allows you to take time to dive in and truly understand the course, and it gets me back to my superintendent hat a little bit, and manage through all the different goals, through all the different things we need to accomplish. So that's been fantastic, and I've been able to see well over 100 golf courses each year these last 3 years. First 2 years I was just hungry, and anything that any of the other agronomists couldn't get to, I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. I'll travel on Saturday, Sunday, and get there and stay, whatever, do what I got to do to just see as many golf courses as I could. And it was a blast. I did some sort of green section business in every single state on the entire East Coast, as well as 4 of 5 Canadian provinces in the last 3 years. So I've gotten around, which has been, it's been really cool. I can't say enough about what I've been able to do and the things I've gotten to see. It's been a blast. But this year is closer to home, which has been good. So I try and stay in the kind of Richmond to Manhattan corridor, and just focus my time there. And this year there was plenty to see and plenty of places to visit. That's for sure. It was a tough one.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that I know who to go to, like during a conference or something. We get some nice blue crab or something. I know where to go in order to, get it picked apart so I can find the good meat in there. Huh?
You got it.
I love it. So summer 25, how would you summarize what you saw this season?
Yeah, it was a tough one. It really was. And, we try to prepare our golf courses with the infrastructure to mitigate what the weather is going to throw at us, because we always know it's going to throw us in the different places and situations that we don't want, so that we can prevent the worst and, just coax things through. But this year, there was a lot of grass that just wasn't going to make it. And, we started out the year with snow cover that we hadn't seen for quite a while. And, as things slowly warmed up, started getting calls from down south in Virginia, and Bermuda grass, zoysia grass, not looking too good. And, go down and see some thinning, the traditional things initially, that shaded areas, traffic, high areas, wet areas. Yeah. Okay. I wrote an article in May. It was, patience, nitrogen, water, it'll come. And then of course, temperatures didn't arrive either. That was big issues. We didn't have growing temperatures until June. So usually you get some of that green up and then we'll get some growth in May in this area. And man, we didn't see it. We didn't see it. And all of a sudden there was bigger issues. And then when things started greening up, it was, wow, there's a lot of areas that are not going to. And that spawned a lot of conversations. I spent at least a day or two a week down from DC and south from June and July, just helping with just making decisions on, how do we mitigate this now? Assessing coverage, do we sprig? And then that led to a lot of other interesting conversations of, in particular of reassessing whether we use pre-emergent herbicides that inhibit roots. Do we get away from it or we time it to where, we know we can sprig if we have winter injury again? And a lot of those conversations, and as well as just planning in the future. What can we do, right? So I refer to, in particular, we're talking about spring dead spot, large patch, those types of things, and talking a lot about fungicides. Well, how do we make the fungicides more efficacious? I referred to Dr. Wendell Hutchins's master's work on it was literally in water volumes, irrigation volumes with and without soil surfactants to improve fungicide efficacy. Well, that came in very handy when talking about improving spring dead spot control, in that, you really got to get these products down in, to where they're getting infected and timing it right. And also having the conversation of, looking at each fall is different, right? The infection periods might be longer than the traditional 1 to 2 application windows. So, weighing that out, do we do 3 applications, and getting in those conversations and really interesting, and got a lot of places just really rethinking, what we're doing in that whole program between the herbicides and fungicides and what's really best for their club, right? So we have the train of thought. We think about this year round. Well, do we have the budget to do this year round? Do we have the staff and capability to apply the products multiple times? Or do we go into one of the other programs where multiple modes of action, post and pre-control, all in the same tank, and try and hit everything at once? And, teasing through that, I think it really is, going to be tailored to your golf course and expectations and abilities. And that's been really fun to dive into and work through with each club, because, not every golf course and expectations are the same. So that's been an interesting one. And then things shifted as, we were in June and just getting recovery, and temperatures came, and temperatures did not moderate. It just stayed hot, stayed humid. I mean, just this nighttime temperatures stayed so warm, and man, it just kept going and going. And I'm in Virginia, and we're talking about winter injury, and here we are, the cool season putting greens are now starting to go the wrong way. And I'm getting calls of, guys in New Jersey with pellet putting greens that, we had that wet, mild May where roots didn't really develop strong. And, I had guys, man, every time I cut cups, I got pancakes out here and we're making it, but how much longer are we going to make it? And well, let's talk about it, because I'm not sure. We got a lot of summer to go here. So that was really what changed things this year. I think winter injury, okay, that happens every couple of years. We plan for it. We know we're susceptible to it, right? Well, then the heat came, and what separated things in July was whether you got rain or if you didn't get the rain. If you could control the moisture, a lot of places did okay. And then anywhere there was, weak growing environments, those types of things, there are plenty of times we had conversations about, well, we had ryegrass and then we went to bentgrass, and I don't know, should we do bluegrass? And I don't care what grass you put there. If you don't get more sunlight, airflow, and correct the drainage and better irrigation coverage, I don't care what species you have. You got to correct everything else first, and then we can grow the strongest grass we can to get through, these periods. And so that was interesting. And I had a buddy in Delaware. He had 24 inches of rain in July alone. And
Oh my goodness.
that was a lot of unhappy grass and coastal flooding and those things. Again, talk about infrastructure. You have a lot of these questions of, well, what's wrong with the grass? Well, it's not necessarily grass's problem. It's not something you can spray your way out of. It's everything else. That's what we need to talk about, and that's what we need to focus on. And that's what's going to give us our long-term turf resiliency and consistent playability. So, so then that led to conversations all over the map of, have some courses that came through pretty well, and we're having conversations on, firmness. Well, that's great. Let's have these conversations. Let's talk about our organic matter and what type of top dressing sand you're using and watering practices, and that's fantastic. We can do that. And then we have others who, truly have to talk about renovation, where grass just got wiped out, and what's best to get back and how we're going to do it. And so it's been just a wide ranging spring through summer, and in the fall lately, talking a lot about just what could we do for recovery. Again, trying to get everything covered in here has been another topic the last few weeks. And, some of these things are subjective as far as, are we doing everything we can, or do we just need to be patient? And I think that's been a big conversation of, pushing things through nitrogen and venting and all these things. Are they the right thing to get that turf coverage back? And I can tell you there's a lot of nurseries going in at a lot of golf courses this fall, being able to plug and minimize areas, and all those things have just been really, really hot topics this year. So
you said something that really stuck out to me during that little recap. And one of it, the thing was, it wasn't the grasses. The grass isn't the reason. It's the infrastructure. It's, the cause and effect situation of you've got poor infrastructure, which is ultimately going to result in just, a poor plant. Talk about how a superintendent can go about educating their, whether it's green committee chair, their GM, whoever it may be, to talk about the necessary infrastructure changes versus just fighting the same battle year after year after year because of whether it's poor subsurface, irrigation, drainage, whatever it may be.
The best scenarios are when you have those, every course seems to have those pocketed fairways, pocketed tees, pocketed greens. And when you can compare those to the healthy ones, that's the easiest tell right there, saying, okay, these growing environments, they're not the same as the others. The grass does not perform. We see this. Here it is. Like this is telling it's the same grass under the same practices, maintenance practices and plans. But why isn't it? And you look around, right? Those can be pretty obvious. When you have the course-wide issues, that's a much more difficult story to tell, because it might be consistent throughout, and then being able to say, here's our maintenance plans, they work, but here's these other things, and it's going to be just showing what you have in infrastructure compared to what modern infrastructure or appropriately specified infrastructure is, to be able to give you the strongest grass you can, being able to map that out.
One of the things, and that's a really good segue into one of the other things that stuck out to me in your article, hope is not a plan, that you put out earlier this year. And the thing that stuck out for me was documentation. And that goes along with what you just said of, comparing the areas, whether it's the pockets that are struggling versus the other. What are some of the successful ways you've seen of documentation? Is it, just photos? Is it collecting other kinds of data? What are some of the ways that you've seen superintendents successfully document some of the issues?
Sure. The biggest thing is as much documentation as you can with as many different parameters as you can. Let the numbers tell the story, right? So everything from weather data, If you can take the different tools that we have through the GS3, firmness is one that's been a new tool, and our moisture meter, where all of that goes into Deacon, right? And then you compare that to everything else over time. So you can compare weather to, ball roll and firmness and those things over time. And that really tells the story of what's going on for performance. Those are the biggest things I've seen that have worked really well. And again, just any way you can document these things. We're measuring organic matter with a standardized method now, so that's been useful in saying, okay, well, there's just more thatch, and they're going to hold more. And now that we can put moisture meter readings to that, and it's recorded over time, that's really telling a compelling story of what's going on. And it's taken the subjective, well, it feels like things are softer than they've ever been, right? You've always have that person on a committee that says, well, it just feels that things are softer this year. Well, yeah, it may be, but guess what? The weather station just showed that it's been, crazy humidity for the last 60 days. So that might have been. And also, guess what? Here's what we've done, though, for volumetric water content. Here's the readings over time. So you can see that we're not applying more water, but there's also our ET rates and everything are just different. Things are softer. And, what can we do from there to further make things firm is where the conversation goes. And it doesn't fixate on, I feel like you're doing something. Right. And that's just not productive for anyone. So being able to steer conversations with the data, with the numbers, can just lead to productivity. So
the other article we were breaking down today was dealing with winter injury, and that's a huge one. I'm north of the border. Every fall when we're putting the course to bed, and every spring when everything's kind of melting, it's a bit of a war out there for us. So the article is great. It gets into fungicides and irrigation and things like that. But any tips and tricks for people who are dealing with some harsh winters and some serious injury from that?
Yeah, and that's interesting because I've spent some time up north, and the winters are changing too, right? A lot of places have to be shut down in November and late fall, well before winter, and buttoned up. And now it seems like snow doesn't really accumulate until later, even after the new year. And how do we adapt to that and be concerned about desiccation and some other things that normally we didn't have to worry about? It was more of the crown hydration, those types of things. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen that's been successful is just assessing each area as it is, right? So assess whether this screen holds water. Well, we need to be aggressive on making sure it doesn't hold water with putting in the channels and double covers and those types of things, and barriers so that you can get air under there if need be, and others that that are exposed, and make sure we get those covered earlier with whatever we have to cover it with. But the biggest conversations that I think have been successful has been looking at each green differently and not as 18 of the same and treat them the same way. Some are just going to do better than others based on where they're located. And, that's been the big conversations I've had that have been successful in deviating individually.
I like that. A lot of different microclimates out there and a lot of different things going on underneath the surface. So that's great advice. We usually leave the last couple minutes to our guest. If there's anything you wanted to talk about, whether it be your job or some advice to superintendents or anything out there, the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks. No, I'll take some advice. After this, I'm taking my oldest to get her behind the wheel driver's test. So
it's a big one.
No, that's definitely my biggest worry right now. But no, I would say to everyone, reflect on this year, take time, take some downtime is the biggest thing I can say. And just reflect on, what was in your control and what was not. And truly evaluate that. Because there's so much that's out of our control. We know there's things that we know we control, but we can't control it because of infrastructure or golfer expectations or the tee sheet or whatever it is. And, take that out and say, is there something that you didn't do as well that you thought you could have? Maybe improve upon that. But also celebrate the W's in that, there's a lot that was out of our control this year, and truly understand that, and let's get past it and really focus on next year. And learned a lot of what areas perform well and what areas don't perform well. Look at those things within, and not just necessarily on the golf course, but within your operation, organizationally, and take some time and just truly think about it, because a lot of people were put really, really through the ringer this year. And don't beat yourself up. Not everything's in your control.
I loved your quote in one of the articles, and it's one of my favorite sayings as well. There are two superintendents, those that have lost grass and those that are going to lose grass. And I think that's just the nature of this business, right? So it happens to everybody.
Yes, I'm guilty as well.
I love it. Well, my advice to you is Life 360. The app has been a game changer for me with my son driving. It's got him into trouble day one when he got his license. So it definitely helps keep an eye on those drivers out there. And just that air pedal on the driver's or the passenger side comes in handy a lot too. So. Good luck to you, my friend.
Up with that. Yeah, great to be with you guys.
Thanks so much for coming on, Brian. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, likewise. Take it easy.
Take care, Brian.
We'll see you. Yeah, it was nice. It was nice to get those guys on here today. Do a little recap of the summer, because we've talked about it a couple times over the last several weeks. Just it was a brutal year for a lot of superintendents out there. Obviously there are pockets that had really successful, really, really painless years, but for a large majority of people around the country, it was challenging. And I loved Brian's advice there at the end. Take the time, enjoy the downtime, but take some serious time to reflect. Think about the things that were in your control and out of your control, and how can you learn from this year, and put a plan in place to try and minimize some of the mistakes that were made, that could have potentially been avoided, and then also give yourself a little bit of grace for the things that were out of your control. I think that's it's one of the hardest things for us to do as, quite frankly, as individuals, giving ourselves grace for some of the things that happened that were potentially out of our control. So a lot of times we think we can control everything, and that's just not true. So, got to learn to be a little easier on ourselves from time to time.
Yeah, no, he said it perfectly. You got to celebrate those victories, and find as we get older, it's harder to do that. And you really got to look for those things and find the time to celebrate it, whether it's a dinner out or just getting together with people or whatever, find a way to celebrate some of those victories on and off the course, because life is, you only get one life and it's short. So you got to find those windows. And we're going to have great years. We're going to have bad years. Everybody's going to flip flop, and everything can't be perfect. So just keep working hard. And if your opportunity comes somewhere else, or, you're able to move down the line, take it, because it's only going to help you.
Yep. 100%.
Another great episode of Rolling with the Green section here on Turf Today, which was recorded on the Superintendent Network. Thank you so much to Tom Gould and Brian Gietka. Amazing guests, so much information in there. Reach out to them. They have answers. And if they don't have the answers you're looking for, they have people they can connect you with. Everybody, have a great week. Rolling with the Green section on Turf Today.